And hello and welcome to the GYDA Talks. And today I am absolutely delighted to have a real proper legend in his own lifetime, which is Jonny Tooze from Lab. And he's one of these guys that you go to breakfast and people say, oh, I saw Jonny and he said that and he said that and he said that. So it's absolutely great to have you on board for this interview.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me. It's really, really kind of you. And what a lovely introduction. I wish all my introductions were like that. That's fantastic. And I hope things people are saying are nice things.
Normally they're normal. And here we have Jonny, who they say he's a very good speaker, but let's just see what he's got to say on this subject.
Put him to the test. Put him to the test. Yeah.
You do kind of get those as you go on stage. I'm sure some people say he's very good. I'm not sure, but let's see if it's interesting or not. So without further ado, why don't you just give us a brief intro to the many facets of what you do?
Sure. So I'm Jonny Tooze. I'm 39 years old, so getting on a bit in the agency world. Father of 3 kids and an amazing, loving wife who's very supportive of my ventures over the last 20 years in digital. I started Lab 17 years ago, which is a digital agency, from a bedroom, and that has grown to quite a well-known agency in the UK. And it's going on further now of doing other things, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I've been involved in digital since I was a kid. Programming on a ZX Spectrum 128K. That was my first computer that I actually coded on, and learned to program quite early on. So I left school at 17, moved out of home, and then really started businesses. So various businesses over the years. I've had some amazing mentors. 17 was my first business, which was promoting economic investment in third world countries with a professor of university, a professor at Surrey University. And that ended quite abruptly. I won't go into why, but actually I will. He was shot and killed actually for his anti-corruption work in Malawi, which was quite an interesting start to my business venture. And then I was lucky enough to meet a guy who was a property guy who founded a business, and I was part of that. And he was a guy called Dermot Vascour, and he was an absolutely brilliant guy. Taught me a huge amount about business. And so I did a couple of interesting businesses really early on in my career. And at 18 years old, I was in a boardroom pitching to a table of 17 venture capitalists. So I kind of got schooled really quickly in terms of how the world worked in business and everything else. And then I worked in a digital agency myself. At the same time, started my own agency, and then I was lucky enough to get a digital role at Panasonic over in Thatcham when they used to build mobile phones in the mobile division. And this was a long time ago, so the iPhone had just been released in that kind of era. So WAP was still there. So it was kind of like early days of mobile, but I was in a content team and web services team, so it was all digital focused. And perfect timing to have a really deep understanding of mobile as it became so, it was just on the very cusp of its growth curve. I was offered a role in Panasonic Europe to run digital. This is when I was 20, to have a €500,000 budget and actually run the digital operation under the CMO at the time, a guy called Sukhbipal, who was absolutely brilliant. And Panasonic were flying in a digital space at that time. So it was great to be close to a very, very large brand, or be part of a large brand, doing digital brilliantly. But they had twice as many visitors as any other competitor in Europe. It was incredible. So some really great times there. But I was offered this role. It was based over in Germany. And I was already making more money out of my agency that I'd already started. So I kind of it was amazing, but it gave me the confidence to say, look, I know what I'm doing in digital here. I've got a mobile background. I've got the digital background. I've been offered this amazing role, and decided to go down the agency route. At the same time, Panasonic pulled out of mobile in Europe. So all of my friends that I'd made there went off to Vodafone, Motorola, Orange, you name it. And I had my first clients as a result. So it was a nice way to start an agency, and Lab kind of has grown from there, really.
Are you an agency person who runs a business? or are you a business person who runs an agency?
It's a difficult one to answer, actually. I love business. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur since I could remember. I love the whole concept of starting something amazing and doing something different in the world. I've always wanted to do things differently. That's been my core focus of life, really, is there's a better way. And so I am quite disruptive naturally. I think, I love the agency world for a number of reasons. And this is why I'm still here sort of 20 years later after working in this space, especially in digital as well, is because I do love the opportunities that it brings. I love the fact that I get to speak to a range of completely different businesses and industries. I've learned so many different skills, both sort of technically how the world works, but also around marketing and communication, around creativity, around consulting and boardrooms, around culture, people. There's sort of leadership. I've obsessed about leadership for the last 15 years. I've had an opportunity to do so many amazing things that apply to pretty much every walk of life, literally from kind of, businesses, every industry, to family, to everything, to hobbies and disciplines, and my own personal development as a human being as well. So the agency world has given me so much. And I always forget to mention, but friendship as well. I've met some incredible people who have inspired the hell out of me, who I've helped as best as I can. And, and there'll be, long-term, very, very long-term, hundreds of long-term friends that I've met who I respect incredibly and get on with brilliantly. So, I've had so much from the agency world, but I think for me, short answer to your question, it's a mix, right? I love the business element of agencies, but I love what agencies do and the creativity and the inspiring, innovative work that agencies can do as well. So for me, it's just one big mix.
Okay, so why do you think that agencies get stuck? I mean, there are these clear stick points at about 5 or 6 and about 15 or 20 and about 25 people.
Yeah.
And some agencies, they don't get stuck. Some agencies, I won't necessarily say sail through, but they navigate, grow up. They go from from baby to toddler to infant to young child. Some people are able to do it. Some is it a peculiarity of the agency world, or is it, in your mind, is it like all businesses have to go through this, and this is why we have a country full of bloody startups and 1- and 2-man businesses? And if you look for 500-person businesses, I mean, they're few and far between.
Yeah. So part of what I've done for the last, probably 5 years now is non-exec work. So I get the privilege of working with some amazing sort of smaller agencies that are wanting to grow and help them to do that. And obviously, through Lab, we're acquiring businesses in a group. So we're also, I get the privilege of working with new agency owners that have come into the group as well. So I have seen this, and obviously I've been through those things. I mean, I've always referred to them as glass ceilings. People are sort of hitting above it and they don't know why, and there is some reason, some force that's stopping them from growing. I think that there is a number of reasons for that, and a lot of what I do is helping people understand what those glass ceilings are. I think fundamentally, and this is probably a thread for a lot of the conversation, a lot of it comes down to human behaviour and our own psychology. There are many, many glass ceilings that are created by our own sort of needs and fears. So I see some people who are so desperate to grow that they miss the basics, and they just live in a sort of, I'd say a vision, but it's not, it's a hallucination, and expect things to kind of happen around them, which they need to understand that actually there's some legwork to do to actually get to that point, and you can't just have a vision without a roadmap and steps. So there's that. There's also people that, and in fact, this is the majority of small agencies as well, or small businesses in general. But I would say actually they listen to the doctrine of growth, and they think for some reason that you are not a successful business unless you're growing, and they are, because of that doctrine, they fear a lack of growth or even shrinking. Right, a lot of people fear that, thinking that unless you're on the way up, you're on the way down. It's not true, and actually the majority of people, and I believe personally, it's why so this industry, our industry, has so many mental health problems is because of that doctrine. Because actually it's okay to run a lifestyle business, a small business. And
right. And there's two things going on. I mean, so the one is we've been fed this bloody American dream, which is you go from the kitchen table to the dining room table to the garage to the industrial unit, and then along comes Dentsu or Accenture, and they buy you for $50 million, and you're happier and richer than your wildest dreams. But
yeah.
that happens as often as people playing football for England. And it's actually the same quality of idea. If you listen to your kids saying, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to play football for England. Oh, right. Okay, cool. What do you want to do with your agency? Oh, in 5 years' time, I want to sell out for 10 million. I mean, bloody wake up. Second thing is, it's gone out of my brain. Second thing, the first thing was so important. But it's, that's I've got it. Sami Mansapur, Agency UK in Bath. Has figured out, he looked around running a 35 person agency, saw people running 65 person, 100 person agencies and thought, actually, you know what? That's not what I want. What I want is the intimacy of a small agency. What I want is the intimacy with clients doing really great work that we're proud of, that they're proud of. And at 32, that's the point where we have the absolute minimum amount of administration and bureaucracy, maximum number of fee earners doing great, cool work. So we're just going to put a line under 32. And when we get to 32, we're not going to take any more people. And I love that. I love that boldness. I love that recognition also that I mean, there's a fancy theory, Greiner's theory of growth. I love the recognition that the scale, the positioning, the opportunity, the admin, the way they sell, the way they charge, the way they price, all reaches this sweet spot. And he knows that at 40, the bubble will burst and he'll be into more meetings, needing heads of So I really respect that decision. 30, and for someone else it might be 100 or it might be 15.
And I think that comes down. So it's another glass ceiling that I talk about quite often, of sort of phases of growth, and it can, as you said, it can happen at different levels. Some people it might happen at 15 people, others it may happen at 60. But at some point you move from informal communication of strategy to formal communication of strategy, which takes a lot of the sort of startup gung-ho, bootstrap fun out of it. Because at that point you do need more people and overhead, and margins are tighter, processes need to get locked down better. But fundamentally, you need to change your leadership style like massively. And it's very, very easy to leave people behind and to become unaligned as a business, and it becomes quite messy. I think it's where, if you understand formal communication strategy in a business, and leadership and management and the differences between those things, but also about autonomy and about motivation and discipline and engagement of employees, then fundamentally you can get through those barriers. But if you don't get it right, what you end up is, I see it all the time, agencies growing up to a point and blowing up and coming right back down again and going up and blowing up, and it's kind of like the roller coaster. I call it the roller coaster. And I think that is one of the reasons, that is a glass ceiling of growth, is understanding actually that you need to step into a more formal, more organized world of understanding the needs of people. Because in a small agency, when you're all in one room, it's easy. They hear the MD on the phone having a chat with a client, and they're setting the tone with the client. This is how we all speak to clients, by the way, guys. That's not what they say, but that's what's implied. And they hear people chatting across the room, and you don't need processes to make sure that context is given through a project of all the different teams working on a project. It's just there because everyone can hear what's going on. Oh yeah, Bob said this about a project, so let's make sure we do it that way. But if you have multiple teams around the world, or like we are now, remote working, this is a big challenge that people are having now, more formal communications. And it's not about size anymore. It's just about the fact that we're not all in the same room. And all of a sudden you have to have these disciplines in place, which fundamentally, it's another one of the disciplines of success. And, if you want to grow an agency, and if you want to get a big agency, there are disciplines there. But also there's a discipline to actually say, do you know what? I'm happy with it being this size. And I know agency owners that have had an agency that have, has never been more than 15 people, and they're multimillionaires, and they might do 2 million revenue, 1 million of that is profit.
So
And you can build an agency like that if you want to.
I did an event in Amsterdam, and there were like 50, 60 people there. And the room split up. So on the left-hand side, you've got sub 10 people, and on the far right, you've got agencies over 150, I think. And the guy puts his hand up and says, you know, this is interesting. I'd like to understand why you've done this. And I explain why, that different people have different needs, tables are here. So he said, but I really want to be on that table there with the people over 200 people. And I said, just look at them. He said, what do you mean? I said, they are all gibbering wrecks. They have all, they're all wearing their Versace shirts and jeans and stuff, but they're all gibbering wrecks. They're all clutching their phones, and they're petrified because they're trying to run a 200-person business. He said, yeah, but the wealth they've accumulated. And I said, let's just go through this really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. So you're 15 people. Let's just say you're £1 million turnover, and let's just say you're 20% EBITDA, and let's say you get 5 times that as a multiplier, just to make the sum simple. So you can sell your business for £1 million now. Oh, yeah, right now you get £1 million, and off you can go and do something else. It's interesting. So now let's go over there to the 200-person agency. 15 million or 250 persons, say 20 million turnover. That's cool. 10% EBITDA. That's 2 million times. So 2 million times. Let's just make it the numbers really times 8 makes it 16 million. That's pretty good. By the way, I'll take you there. How much of the business do you now own? Now you've been through 3 rounds of funding.
Yeah.
I own 10% of the business. So 1.6 less costs. So you're going to come out with just over £1 million, having worked your backside off for an extra 10 years. Yeah, you've had 10 years of good stuff, and you've got the big BMW. I get that. But I'm not so sure that Freddie, with his 15 people all around him, isn't in a better place and doesn't have a better relationship with his kids and his family than stressed out Jamie with his 200 staff and his 5 offices in 4 countries.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to grow and that's what turns you on, I've not got a problem with that. My thing is always, we'll help you run the agency you want to run. I think part of the problem is everyone thinks, because of that American dream, they think bigger is better. And I'm not.
I agree with you. I think there's it's a just different mindset, and I think I do see people that have grown large agencies, and they are under incredible. I mean, there is incredible pressure there, but I think most of them can do it because, again, it's another glass ceiling, and it's a psychology thing of an owner or a owner operator of an agency, and most 200-person agencies have kind of got there by one person growing it. 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, but people growing it. And again, there's another psychology thing here, is that some people don't like the stress or can't handle the stress. Or actually more than that, is that people see it as stress. And I think there is a different mentality between agencies that are probably always going to stay small and agencies that are going to grow, is that the owners don't see it the same way. They don't see it as stress. They just see it as, that's their job to deal with these big challenges on a regular basis. And they don't sort of, I mean, so I as a we're not a 200-person agency, but we're probably knocking on the door about 90. So it's fairly big. The reality is that my job is big stuff. That's one of my accountabilities, actually, is dealing with the big stuff. And
I was speaking yesterday to a guy who runs a 35-person agency, and he says to me, it's tough. I said, well, you need to get the bloody sales engine going. He goes, yeah, I know. Yeah. So what's going on to make the sales happen? So he said, well, it's difficult. So I said, go on, tell me why it's difficult. He said, well, the website's not ready. And I've been working on it for a month. And it's like, sorry, just run that bomb past me again. Well, I've been working on it for a month, and it'll be ready in about a month's time. I said, why are you, that's why your agency is stuck, because you are working on the blinking website. I mean, you have people who can do it. Well, I'm fickle about getting these things right. It's got to be the right. Now, he could well be absolutely right that only he can do the perfect website. But they're not doing any sales because the website doesn't reflect what they do. And it's like, that's why and he's a lovely guy and there's a lovely agency. Don't get me wrong, really lovely guy, really like. But that's why he's running a really nice 35 person agency where people are really nice to each other and having a really good time.
Yeah.
And then there are people I know who have said, you know, well, Alex Lancashire, who I interviewed, you know, said, I decided in 5 years time I was going to grow an agency, and in 5 years we would sell to the likes of Accenture or Dentsu, and that we would probably have 175 people. And I worked with him, I helped him. And it was like, you know, tick, 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 tick. And literally he was 3 weeks out, you know, and on the 5 year mark, they had 185 people, something like that. And Dentsu, I think the third suitor they had, turned up, and the handshake was done, and the rest was history.
Oh, good for him.
Absolutely. But he knew where he was going. And lots of the generalist marketing, full service agency guys are like that. They're clear. This is the business that we're in. We work our backsides off for 5 or 7 years. We maintain 30% of the business, which will get sold out to the likes of the big boys. We're not quite sure what that's going to be. So let's groom it for growth from the beginning with no illusion, which is a very different model from, oh, I'm on my own. Oh, I got 3 or 4 people working with me. Oh, there's 10. I think I need someone to do the accounts for me. Oh, yeah, I could have a head of dev. Oh, yeah, I could have someone doing selling. Oh, we're 15 now. Yeah. I haven't seen my wife for a while, and I carry my bloody phone with me wherever I go. What's happened? And that's cool as well. You know, it's not prescriptive. I think that's my point, that there are different versions of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of agency. I mean, just going back to what you said, there's a few things that I think I should mention. Is that one, you know, I see agency owners in this constant game of whack-a-mole, and I call it whack-a-mole, like my glass ceilings. I call it the game of whack-a-mole, and I see this is as a glass ceiling. Is that agency owners tend to take on things themselves, and there's a number of reasons. I'll talk about that in a second, but fundamentally, there are key pillars of success that you need to work in any business, but in an agency specifically, things like sales and things like marketing and things like leadership and culture and things like recruitment and things like process. These are all just really easily defined pillars that fundamentally, if you haven't got that pillar, you know, really risen up and high, you'll have problems, right? And you know, the classic one is going like activity around sales, shit we need to sell, go and sell. You go and sell loads of stuff and all the rest of it, then you come to delivering it and you go, we've got to deliver it. And you spend the next 6 months delivering it. And then all of a sudden you turn around and go, oh no, I've got no sales again. And you're just going from discipline over here to discipline over here and jogging around the whole time. That's the classic the sort of roller coaster that I see in most small agencies. And fundamentally, the game is to be able to afford really, really good people to own that pillar. And that's their job. That's their single-minded job, is to own that pillar, raise it up and have it working brilliantly. And what I find is that one of the barriers to growth, again, I come back to the psychology piece, is that there's a lot of fear in agency owners of letting go. And, you know, you hear about this. This is a classic SME growth kind of doctrine of learning to let go. And people don't really understand what that means. But fundamentally, letting go is about hiring someone better than you to do something, because you don't need to have faith that they're going to do it. If someone's letting you down the whole time, then yeah, you're right to be worried about it and you're right to get involved. What you should be doing is finding people who are better than you at something. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come in and just wave a magic wand and it's going to be done. But what it means is that you're going to have to work with them and train them and lead them brilliantly, give them direction, give them clarity, reward them when they're great, and do the leadership piece. And that is also something that I think a lot of people miss out on. They don't really understand what leadership is. Leadership from fear is, you know, I see all over the industry. People are worried about what people are doing and whether they're working hard or not, or whatever. How, you know, is it a good enough job? It's not good enough for me. And that is not leadership. That is just, well, fundamentally, that style of leadership is just stealing from the future rather than investing in it. And that is a big, big problem I see in our industry, is that people don't have the leadership skills, and that's a big problem.
But the problem, well, there are a number of problems. There's what I would call escape velocity. So most agencies are trapped within the gravitational pull of mediocrity. They don't earn enough, they don't charge enough, their clients aren't big enough, their people aren't well enough qualified. So you kind of enter this doom loop that you can't employ the best people because you haven't got enough money, and therefore you don't get the best work, and so you go down. But there are agencies who charge disproportionately more, I would argue, disproportionately better work, giving clients disproportionately better value.
Yeah.
Therefore, they can employ disproportionately better people. Therefore, they can acquire disproportionately better clients. Therefore, they can do disproportionately better work. And there are numbers around, utilization rate, price point, cost of sale, and so on and so forth, that those agencies succeed in hitting. And it's kind of like the rump of the bell curve gets stuck because they can't see a way out of that. They can't charge £150 an hour because of the type of clients they have and the sort of people they employ. They can't employ a big hitter because they don't have the margin to do it. They don't have the, another, I mean, I love the idea of whack-a-mole, apart from the fact that Boris has stolen it. But the concept of how do we play like a Premier Division team? What do we do? Well, it's kind of like it's a bit late, because you've employed a lousy centre half, a lousy centre forward, and a really poor goalkeeper. You've got a bad pitch. We need to kind of rethink and almost reskin this, and I guess that's about setting off early. I mean, what's you were saying you're quite heavily into acquisition and M&A now. So what have you seen in terms of acquisition? What makes something an acquisition target?
Excuse me.
Really interested to understand.
So I think one of our again, I think it's a lot of this comes down to psychology. It's great to see people with ambition, but again, it's a difference between a sort of vision and a hallucination. A vision is something that someone's actually doing something about, whereas a hallucination is just an idea that they've got that they're not actually working towards. And I think to answer your point to start with, I think it's fundamentally, I think, to grow an agency successfully, you've got to understand that it's stepping stones, and you can't just go, oh, we're going to be that Premier League business with charging £1,500 day rates for a developer. You can't just jump to that. You can't pretend that you are, because you won't be delivering that quality. But you need to put a plan in place of how you're going to get there and go, that's where I want to be, and then work it backwards. Okay, so if I want to be charging £1,500 for that, how do I do that? So I need a brand that is a well-known brand that's got a good reputation around it, that people see straight away and buy into that. So how am I going to do that? I need great people, and I need discipline, because if people are going to pay £1,500 a day for a developer, then they're going to expect bloody good quality and accountability from me. So how do I put the process in place to do that? And how am I going to train my people to be able to get to that point? Do I have people that could actually get to that point or not? These are all big questions you have to ask, but they're part of a strategic plan to get there, and you can get there. You can fundamentally get there, and also it's just a bit of sales is a key thing. It's like how you're selling stuff to people. You've got to be confident in your team. The biggest problem with small agencies, and one of the biggest problems, again, another glass ceiling, is pricing strategy. And people get that wrong all the time, And it's about their confidence. It's about their psychology. The amount of agencies I've got into, and I've turned around and gone, $450 a day, you're joking, right? That's way under market rate. You're making it too easy for yourself. Why you're growing at the moment is because you're just undercutting everybody, which anybody can do, right? Anybody can do that because you've commoditized yourself. As a result, you'll always be in a position where you're the supplier. You're never a partner. You're just a supplier to them, and you're a cheap one, which they like. Don't get me wrong, because they like your costs versus quality. That's great. But have a sensible conversation with them going, look, we're way under market rate. Market rate is $750 for this type of developer or whatever. We're charging you $500 a day. We're actually going to put our costs up to $650 a day. And they're going to go, well, it's still cheap. Yeah, right. and they've just massively increased their profit margin. And now they can afford that new person to lead marketing for them and sort their brand out, or a new salesperson start bringing in new revenue for them, or a head of development or an operations director or whoever else they need to begin that process of doing that. So there's so many things like that. And also people get comfortable as well with a team. They look at a team and go, well, this is kind of how we've all grown up and whatever. And what they do is it's like the boiling frog syndrome, is that they are so used to certain things working a certain way. They don't realize there's another way of doing things. And it's only when you kind of get a visibility from, either a non-exec or an organization like yours, or visibility of inside another agency, where all of a sudden you realize and go, shit, you're so much better at this than us. We thought we were all right. And all of a sudden, the penny drops and you go, we are not doing this very well at all. And then you need to realize, okay, we need to reinvent this and do something in a different way. And that makes a big difference, I think, to the thinking. It's kind of the wake up calls people need to all of a sudden realize, actually, we are never going to, if we carry on doing things this way, we're never going to be that agency. There's disciplines that those agencies have, the successful agencies, there are disciplines they have that you need to have if you want to be as good as them, like a Premiership football team. You have nutrition.
But there's something that separates the winners. There's something that separates out the winners and losers. So the graveyards are full of agencies that said, we had leadership, we had mindset, we had process, we had systems, we had the clients, we had the IP, we had the office address, and we communicated it, and we had the right psychological profiles,
Yeah.
And the insolvency practitioner took my house away.
Yeah.
And then you talk to the winners, and they list off the identical list. We had strategy, a process, systems, people in place, mindset, psychological profiling, client list, location. And now look at us, I'm richer than your wildest dreams. And it's kind of like because history is written by the winners, there's an assumption that what the winners say is good. But I would argue that loads of people have done that. They've gone on that course, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the secret sauce hasn't worked, or the secret sauce.
I think that's fundamentally down to one or more pillars just not working and not being talked about. Because everyone can turn around and go, I did all the right things, but did they? So you've lost your key clients in the last 6 months, and what are you doing about it? Well, I'm hoping I can win more clients. Okay, well, that's the wrong thing to do. You should have cut your team, right? That's the discipline there. The discipline is plan profitability at all times. If you're not planning profitability, you're going to go bust, right? It's as simple as that. So do you have that discipline in place? Do you have a good CFO or FD or financial manager or whoever you are, or an advisor that will turn around to you and go, you're being an idiot. You're living on hope. It ain't going to work, right? You will go bust unless you do this. You need to get rid of some people, or whatever other costs you've got in your business, right? If you don't have that discipline, then you will be in the graveyard, absolutely, right? Or unless you have like amazing relationships with your bank, which again, most agency owners don't get that. They look at their bank as some faceless weirdo because they grew up, they started a business and they had an account manager at a business bank which had 1,000 accounts and never spoke to them, and they never turned around to the bank and went, all right, well, we're bigger now, can we have someone bigger? And they go, yeah, sure. And then here's the guy who runs 100 accounts, and you go and lunch with him and you have chats with him, and you work out how banks work and you make a relationship, and you understand that there's a world out there of banking facilities that can help you put suspension to your business as and when you need it, right? But most people don't do that. Most people run with almost zero suspension across a rocky terrain. It drives me insane. I'm like, so how often do you meet your bank manager or other people that can fund you and finance you should you need it? Never. Okay, well that's crazy, isn't it? Because that's the fuel that you're going to need to run your business.
This is about are you a technician? Are you a supervisor? Are you a manager? Are you a director? Or are you an investor in a business? And most people wear the technician hat, or maybe the supervisor, or maybe even the manager hat. Yeah. Some get to understand what the role of a director is, although they won't have a job description and they won't be able to define what it is. I'm a director. Well, what have you got a job description? So KPIs. And then there's this additional bit, which is about acting like an investor. If you act like an investor, your perception about what needs to happen and your kind of viewpoint. And I guess just going back to this kind of this thing about you now being an acquisition and M&A. I mean, what do you what do you look for? Do you have a checklist, or is there a sense of feel? Is it about fit? What's the piece there?
So yeah, there's a lot actually that we've done probably slightly differently to other people. Just going back to that last point, I just want to say one thing. And one of the biggest issues I see, and one of the sort of things I do from a coaching point of view, is getting agency leaders to understand what reverting to type is. Because as you say, a lot of people start. I mean, a lot of small agencies are basically turbo freelancers. That's pretty much what they are, right? They're a freelancer that want to do great work, and they've got they start off as a freelancer and they've got people underneath them, and they might end up with 60 people underneath them. Turbo freelancer, that's a super turbo freelancer. But fundamentally, anyone who is a technician to start with, or a doer, and they've started a business because they're a good doer, what happens is when the SHIT hits the fan and they've got a stressful situation in front of them, the natural instinct is to revert to type and to do what they do know best. Which, in case might be rolling up the sleeves and coding, it might be getting on Photoshop all night, whatever it is. And that is like one of the big disciplines of being able to run an agency successfully, is to understand that actually, as the leader of the agency, your job is to keep your desk as clear as possible. And when the shit hits the fan, your job is to lead, right? Maybe to manage a fire or whatever, but fundamentally it's about leadership. Ideally, lead somebody else to manage the fire, right? To deal with it that way. That's where you need to get to as you grow. If you are feeling that you revert to type, and when things go wrong, or when you're under pressure, when the client project's late or something's gone wrong or whatever, if you're the person that rolls your sleeves up and goes, right, let's get on with it. How do I do this? What you're doing is you're stripping autonomy away from your people. You're showing that it's just me, don't worry. Ownership goes completely, because who cares? Why do I need to work hard as an employee when the owner of the business always comes to the rescue if something goes wrong? I don't need to worry about that sort of stuff, right? You're stripping so many disciplines out by doing that, reverting to type. And it's a really important thing that all agency owners need to understand. They're putting in the glass ceiling above their head because their own psychology, because they revert to type when they have fear. And the sooner they understand that, the better it is, because what you need to do is revert to leadership in those kind of situations. Because when shit hits the fan, most people know about it in an agency. And when people are under distress, or when there's something going wrong, that is when people are most susceptible to a definition of culture. And it's the leader's behavior that sets that. About 70% of agency culture or business culture is set by the leader of the agency or the business. And 70% of that is set by their behavior in a crisis. So when there is a crisis going on, you fundamentally, you absolutely have to learn to revert to leadership, which is go and take a cold shower if you need to, go and have a breather. Don't rage, don't let your emotions flow, don't get irrational, go rational, think leadership. Leadership disciplines are in place. And this is what you do. This is why, like in martial arts, you practice your blocks 1,000 times. So when the punch comes in, it's your subconscious that does it. You block and that's it, right? That's what happens. You do not like sit there and go, oh, a punch coming in and try and duck it or something stupid, because you're going to get hit. And in leadership game, it's exactly the same thing. When there's a crisis hitting your lap, the first thing you do is look at it and you go, okay, revert to leadership basics. And you go, okay, guys, let's sit down. Let's plan this, right? It's all right. Don't worry about it. It's nothing we can't fix, right? And then who's gonna take point on this? You, okay? Tell me what you need to fix this, right? That's the leadership game. People miss out on that all the time, and I think that's one of the biggest glass ceilings that I see in people, is not being able to handle those crises. And with the agency world, we do have crisis. A lot of us are project based. There will be crisis. There'll be ups and downs. That's the way to handle it. And if you can't keep a cool head on that, you're probably the wrong person to lead the agency, or you need leadership training to understand the game a bit better. But sorry, in answer to your question, Robert, I mean, I think it's
it's good.
in terms of acquisition, for us, we looked at the world. I immersed myself in the world of M&A about 5-6 years ago, and met some incredible people that were doing some incredible deals, or had done them on the sort of buy and sell side, and were involved in the M&A world. I had lots of breakfast, lots of lunch, lots of beers, and I have done for the last 6 years. So I got a really good perspective of this, because my ambition was to build an agency up to then be acquisitive and to grow inorganically as well as organically. So I understood the landscape, and I saw all the different types of buyers. Obviously, there was the big network agencies, the WPPs of the world, that were doing the normal transactions, and I spoke to loads of people in their M&A team about how they did it, and it was really interesting. Some of the sort of tricks they used, and some of the deals they did, and what they looked for in businesses. And then obviously there's the sort of the new wave of consultancies that came in, obviously led by Accenture because they're public rather than partnership owned like all the rest of the consultancies, and looked at their sort of models and how they were looking to do deals. And then obviously, you know, looking at the landscape, and majority of the deals are one-off purchases. They're not by the big networks or whatever. And then sort of like the mid-market as well. So, you know, looking at the depths and businesses like that came sweeping through in sort of PE-backed roll-ups, and the increase of PE in the M&A world as well has been dramatic over the last 5 years. It was next to nothing 5 years ago, and then, you know, you go back to 2017, it was like 11% of all transactions globally were PE backed. The next year it was like 25%, and now I don't know what the figures are for 2019. I haven't seen them, but I'm sure a brilliant M&A genius will tell me. But it wouldn't surprise me if it's 35%, 40% of deals being backed by private equity now. So slightly different games. So immersed myself in this world, saw the structures and whatever. And what I realized is that most of the roll-ups or, you know, sort of acquisition strategies that you see are CFO based, kind of like spreadsheet based kind of strategies. And many of them have a kind of thread that goes through them of like, this is what we're trying to do as a group. And, you know, it's normally about geography and reach, and I get that, right? You know, so, you know, like we can then go to much bigger global clients and have people East Coast, West Coast, and 24/7 operation, blah, blah, blah. So I could see some of the threads that were there and some of the strategies that were there in terms of roll-ups. But fundamentally, I saw that they were very driven by the spreadsheets. And I didn't want to do that at all. And my vision was to create a group focused around IP generation and our USP, which is around human behavior, but also to grow it profitably and to help agencies through these challenges as well. So our model was to take smaller agencies and to help them grow into big agencies, and we've proven that model. I mean, it really has worked. You know, we've you know, taken Reflect Digital based in Kent, and you know, within 6 months they were doing twice the revenue they went from sort of 1 million to 2 million revenue, and most of that was, you know, profitability. So, you know, we've done that, and we've stripped out all of the problems around having to hire an expensive finance manager and all that. We've got that centrally, so we've already got those in lab groups, so we can help them do that. And disciplines around HR process, I mean, Reflect were great anyway, to be honest, but there's stuff that we can do, and we've got the sort of the expensive pillar owners already in lab. So for us was, and we're going to do one hopefully closing tomorrow actually, another creative business this time. But we wanted to buy agencies that weren't just about kind of like more of, it was complementary businesses where we can work together with this sort of deep understanding of human behavior that we have to sort of supercharge what they're doing. And, you know, I mean, what do I look for? I look for a cultural fit. That's our first real thing. Is we have obviously understanding human behavior and having a lot of amazing psychologists and behavioral economists in the business. We're quite lucky in that we've got a really good model for cultural due diligence. So we've got like a process that we go through to understand whether there's going to be a fit there. Obviously, the business itself has to fit into the group, but how does it fit? How does it look? And then obviously, you know, can we add value to them? Like, is there, you know, what is the real value we can add here? Is it just to kind of grow them more, or is it to teach them what we do and make it better? Like, can we improve their pricing strategy quickly, or increase their pricing strategy? Can we help them hire better talent? Can we help them train their talent? You know, can we help them save costs? Can we help them with their client base? So there's a lot of questions that we asked ourselves of each of the acquisitions we've done. You know, is it going to be strategically, does it work for us? Is it going to be something that we can build quickly? And, you know, so far it has worked. But, you know, we will build and we'll continue doing this. And I think the model is very different because it's less strategic, it's less planned, and it's more organic. It's about getting close to businesses and understanding what they do and understanding their ambitions and drive, understanding where we can help them, how they would fit, potentially partnering with them, and then to move to a position where it just makes sense for everybody to do it. And fundamentally, you know, one of the things is that it's really hard. It was hard before, you know, like, you know, even from 2008, it's been hard to be a small business, right? You're vulnerable. And we wanted to create a home for businesses to grow autonomously, and all the businesses that we're acquiring will remain autonomous. I sit on their board, but fundamentally all decision making is mutual. It's not like we have reserved matters in the shareholders agreement, but very rarely do we just discuss them, and that's just a matter of good corporate governance and discipline. But fundamentally, if people want to do something, I'll support them and go, okay, well, I probably wouldn't, but if you want to do it, fine. And there's plenty of times where they've done it and they've owned it and they've nailed it, even though I sort of said, I wouldn't do that. But that's the model that we're building here is, and one of the things we're doing as well is not taking 100% of shares of an agency. The maximum we'll take is 80% of an agency, excuse me, because we want people to be incentivized. We want them to grow their own agency, but we want to fast track them through all the crap, like all the stuff that fundamentally means that you've got to take your phone on holiday with you the whole time, and the stress and those lessons. We want to guide them through them so they learn them, but without all of the pain. And when we've proven that model, it does work. And fundamentally, you want to make everyone wealthy out of this. I mean, the aim is that we get to a point where someone knocks on our door and says, we want to buy you, but we've all made enough money on the journey that we turn around and go, well, we don't really need to sell. And that's the ultimate aim that we want to get to, is that we're in a position where actually we can turn around and go, do you know what, should we sell? Nah, we're loving this. And that's what and maybe at that point I might leave and get bought out or something. I don't know. Maybe there's someone better to run the business than me. But it's gone, for me personally, Lab has changed, and my role has changed completely from an owner, founder, kind of manager role. And it's very much changed now into I represent the shareholders. I'm here to create culture. I'm here to ensure that our decision-making framework is adhered to by everybody. That's a really simple one. That's the group ethos around our decision-making framework. Is great work, people first, and commerciality. As long as people have got those three things in their head, they're free to make decisions. And as long as they can justify that they've thought about them, that's how we roll. Because we want to increase autonomy in the business. And my job is to make sure people are doing that and understanding that, really. And then obviously acquisitions and starting to understand different businesses and acquire them. So Lab has completely changed, I think, as a business. And we're about to launch 2 new agencies ourselves under Lab. To sort of, the Lab agency is moving down, and Lab Group is as a brand is moving up a bit. So it's all change, but it's quite exciting. And we've got the whole innovation stuff going on as well, which I think a lot of agencies sort of try and do, but don't necessarily get quite right. And a lot of people try and launch products and things like that, and some are successful, but most aren't. And I think there's a certain discipline around launching products. And I think the best example I've got is probably Nikki Gattenby at PropellerNet, who has launched a couple of amazing projects. I mean, I just rate her a million miles in the sky. She's an incredible human being. And she's done that really well. So if you ever want to, she wrote a book called Super Engaged. I'm not sure whether you've read it or not, but it's a brilliant book, and she talks there about like launching products and how that worked. But a lot of agencies try and do that. It doesn't really work so well. But again, we took a different approach to that, which was what are the disciplines around decent product development, and we've got an innovation team at Lab, and that's what we're doing, and that's why we've won about £600,000 worth of grants in the last 6 months, which is useful timing because of COVID and all the rest of it, as the market kind of dips for everybody. But they are, I think our monitoring officer at Innovate UK said that we were the 3rd highest ranked Innovate UK grant that he's ever seen, which was quite a nice compliment. Got backed by MIT and all sorts, and we just got all the right people in the right place to do this brilliantly. But I think that's the other thing, is that the agency landscape is changing quite rapidly.
Yeah, and that's something I just wanted to touch on. That's we're kind of getting near the end.
Excuse me.
What do you? Yeah, everything's moving all the time. Google used to be the only gig in town. Now it's clearly not.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. How do you see that landscape developing, and more importantly, how do you see the role of an agency fitting into this new world?
It's a hard one to answer, because in many ways I see bleakness for the traditional agency. Certainly media and advertising, it's changing. Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in advertising at the moment, which is a bit scary. There's a lot of brands boycotting Facebook because of Facebook's values and some of their behaviors. And I think there's a lot of brands boycotting Facebook because their competitors aren't advertising on it anymore, so don't need to bother themselves. And I think that's a certain truth of that sort of. It's not really morals led from a lot of people, but fundamentally, ad spend is decreasing. Obviously, spend through the crisis we're currently in is decreasing, and I think people are getting a little bit more nervous. I think. I see a lot of sort of swings and roundabouts. I mean, in the game for 20 years, so I've seen multiple times where brands have gone through a phase of bringing stuff in house and then outsourcing it again and whatever. And industries do it in different cycles. But so it's that's just kind of I'm long in the tooth enough to know that's just kind of it happens. But I do see new levels of discipline coming in. I don't think it's going to be as easy to start an agency anymore. You go back 5-10 years ago and it was quite easy to be a turbo freelancer and just grind out creative work for a brand or whatever and get a bit lucky with a few sales or just dabble in the local markets and local SMEs and shops and stuff like that, and that's works too. And that that will exist for a while, but I think the divide between small agencies that deal with kind of simpler local stuff versus the sort of the bigger agencies. For us, we saw this happening anyway 5 years ago. That was one of our reasons for one of our strategic motivators was to see that there was very much a divide happening in the agency landscape, and you see that. I mean, it's mainly through the acquisition. I mean, there aren't many medium-size independent agencies anymore. There really aren't. I mean. If you look at sort of the very sort of top of mid-tier, Jellyfish went not so long ago, and an amazing agency. But I mean, they were kind of the last big sort of independent agency, and there are some about, and then some that won't sell. But fundamentally, through the consolidation of businesses, it's very much a kind of like very big agencies and very small agencies, and that's kind of how it is. And the very big agencies are coming into the small agency kind of world when it comes to projects. So, you will be competing with the EPAMs or the Accentures for projects where you thought before, oh yeah, it's a £100,000 project, we'll never be competing with those guys. They are winning those kind of projects and taking on those kind of accounts these days. So, they are going for a longer tail of client and to grow and expand themselves. And that makes it very, very hard to grow. I mean, the glass ceiling is coming down. That's the truth of it. And that's one of the motivations for creating the group in the first place was collectively we can punch way above that weight. We can compete with the big boys and girls. So that's the kind of the way we thought about it. But it's hard. The landscape is changing. It's getting tougher. Obviously, with the crisis at the moment, it's extremely tough for most agencies. There are some amazing success stories which I love hearing, but most people are struggling because most industries are struggling. And that's just the truth of it, right? It's a very difficult time for all agencies, but it's now more important than ever to have those basic disciplines in place, to have the focus on sales and marketing, to have the focus on leadership and culture, to ensure that your processes are great and your brand is well protected and the quality is there. It's absolutely essential right now to have those pieces in place. Because as I say to all my non-exec clients and all the agencies in the group, I mean, post-COVID, the landscape's going to be very different. It's going to be fairly barren. There won't be as many agencies anymore, and the work will most likely come back, and probably not as fast as the V shape that everyone predicted in the first instance, but it will come back, and the landscape will be different. And so, if you can survive this and come out of it better than you went in, with a better culture and more, better disciplines, and have you taken the opportunity to transform during this crisis, you've got a new world that you'll enter into, and it could be
right. No, absolutely. So final question, and you kind of half answered it, or we've answered it all the way through the interview actually. But final question is, what are your golden nuggets? What are your top tips? What are your pearls of wisdom that you share with agency owners right now? I mean, we're recording this as we go into August, so-called post-COVID, so-called V-shape. It won't be. If we're lucky, it won't be an L or a U. Probably. So what's your advice to agency owners, agency leaders?
So I think probably the the highest level advice I could give in terms of golden nugget would be sort of understand thyself. You know, as you know, you really got to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and you've got to understand when you're being motivated by needs and fears, and really be disciplined around unpacking that sort of stuff that's going on in you as a person, because that will ultimately influence your decision making, and your decision making is the only thing that matters in terms of where you're going in the future. So understand what influences your decision making, and be disciplined around not making decisions when you're in a bad state or whatever. You get out of those states, learn to get out of those states, learn to think differently about things. Don't fixate on problems, move on quickly and think of them in different perspectives. Have someone to bounce stuff off you, off your thinking, so you don't get stuck in those kind of ruts. Fundamentally, if you can focus on your decision making and make better decisions, ultimately that will start that that sort of the ball rolling. And if you want to snowball your agency and get it bigger and bigger and bigger as you go, you know, it's about constantly making good decisions, and, you know, fundamentally underpinned by great leadership and great culture. But, you know, deciding on who you're hiring, what clients you're taking on, what values you're going to live in your agency and define. So your decision making is everything, and it's something that's worth obsessing about. And you know, when you make a decision, maybe it might work for you if you write decisions down and go, was that the right decision really? But fundamentally, you can only make good decisions if you've got good feedback loops. So the leader's first job is to ensure every single feedback loop possible is open. So when you get feedback from anyone, whether you like it or not, you know, the only real response to that is thank you. You know, I appreciate your feedback. You've got to keep your feedback loops open. And I see it so often. Your decision making will never get better unless you open your feedback loops. So always be gracious and grateful when people give you feedback, and encourage it as well. At the point you have a bad reaction, even if it's just a as soon as you have that reaction, people were less likely to give you feedback the next time, and you're closing your feedback loops down. So the more discipline you have around opening your feedback loops, the better feedback you'll have in your decisions, and then you'll be you know, fundamentally snowballing your agency. There you go, a golden nugget.
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely, I love so much of that, and you know, your reputation, of course, well earned and well deserved. Thank you very much for being an absolutely great guest. We could have gone on for about 5 hours, I get the feeling, but we squeezed loads in. So a very big thank you to you, Jonny. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me, Robert. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Great. Cheers.